Well, good evening. First, want to just kind of give a run of this press availability, and I stress it's a press availability to update the City of Little Rock about some strategic steps that will be implemented today. And also, Chief Humphrey will share a public safety update, and then after we give a general synopsis of today, Chief Humphrey's public safety update, we will then open the floor for questions. And that's generally the schedule for today. That being said, I really just want to first just share the utmost appreciation for the men and women of the Little Rock Police Department, as well as peaceful protesters in the city of Little Rock. And I start that way is because in a city, in a state, in a nation where we have rights, First Amendment rights, we have laws, and it is our ability to always maintain peace, protection, and service. And so in this period of time that we are here in the city of Little Rock, the state of Arkansas, and our entire nation, in addition to being in the middle of a global pandemic that no one alive has ever been through before, we are experiencing some tiring, turbulent times that are bringing us forth for real reasons of pain and suffering across this nation. And we know that many of us understand the pain, some don't. But ultimately, it's about leadership. And leadership is a balance of understanding pain and long suffering, understanding the intent and the will of peace, and understanding true leadership. And with that being said, the city of Little Rock promotes peaceful protests. The city of Little Rock promotes public safety, and the city of Little Rock appreciates not only peaceful protesters, we appreciate the Little Rock Police Department and all law enforcement, because they too are experiencing trying and turbulent times, and they are putting their life on the lives to protect every resident in Little Rock and every resident in the state of Arkansas. And in that same vein, the peaceful, and I continue to stress peaceful protesters, are exercising their First Amendment rights for a reason. Someone that went out last night to be with Little Rock residents and peaceful protesters, I can tell you firsthand, there are peaceful protesters and there are those that are from outside forces who have every intent and mission to destroy and destruct property and cause chaos in the city of Little Rock. And we have no room for anyone coming to our city to destroy and destruct. And we will appropriately exercise whatever authority that we need for those who are damaging property and those that are not peacefully protesting. We are a 21st century community policing organization, and quite frankly, if you are paying attention to anything across this nation, what's happened in Little Rock Saturday, Sunday, and Monday is to the credit of peaceful protesters, and more importantly to the Little Rock Police Department by maintaining peace and order, and without major property damage and injury. But there has been injury and there has been property damage. As a leader, it's not about being liked. It's about doing what is right. It's about doing what's best for the overall community. And we will protect every Little Rock resident. We will protect every peaceful protester. And we will handle every perpetrator that is doing any type of damage to the city of Little Rock. If you want to peacefully protest, we honor that. We recognize that, and we understand the history of protests And I'm one that really understands that without peacefully protesting, I wouldn't be sitting before you today. But we will not allow our property to be damaged, and we will not allow our city to be destroyed. That being said, with understanding even more additional intelligence than we shared from yesterday, we've received critical, and I stress very critical information that is causing us to amend our curfew to 8 p.m. tonight. And there will also be proactive measures to ensure the health, the safety, and the welfare of all Little Rock residents, all businesses, all peaceful protesters. It's serious. I can't go into much detail, but with every fiber in my bone, we ask, we urge, please abide by the curfew. We ask and we urge. We understand you can exercise your First Amendment right, and we honor that, and we respect that. But for those who have come from outside of our city, and from those that are choosing to damage property, we will handle it. And we ask everyone to respect First Amendment rights, peaceful protests, but also to respect the property and the city of Little Rock. I'm now going to allow Chief Humphrey to share some information from a public safety standpoint, and then we'll go to press questions.
So good afternoon, everyone. I would be remiss if before I started if I didn't cover that the things that the citizens and the nation and the state nation doesn't see here in Little Rock. Just Sunday, we had a group of protesters that came out in front of one of our police stations, and no one got a chance to capture the fact that the police officers and those citizens were hugging and crying and praying together. That's something that we don't see. That's something that we don't hear about. But I would be remiss if I didn't lead off by sharing with the type of people that we have in this city that are caring. There are those citizens that really respect and love the police department. They love their city government. So I had to share that. But then again, there's that element that comes into the city, outside influences that come into the city. I call them opportunists that take advantage of the hard work and the blood, sweat, and tears that our citizens have put forth in building this community. And they can't protest peacefully. They don't know how to express their First Amendment rights. So what do? They gather up in the crowd of the peaceful protesters, and they antagonize people. And then once the peaceful protesters leave, then these individuals become very irate, very destructive. And then what happens is that the nation sees, they observe the Little Rock Police Department and other entities having to go in and make arrests or use chemical agents to get people out of control. And the sad thing about it, those normally aren't the residents of that city. So I think it's very important for me as the police chief to express that we have some amazing citizens in this city. We have a very good police department that has been very overworked these last few days. Our state agencies, our local agencies have really helped us. But I want to just kind of give you a rundown. Last night, it started off as a peaceful protest. As you all may see, as the mayor was leaving, trying to go to his car, people followed. The people that followed him were very proactive. At some point, there were people in that crowd that were not proactive. As the mayor left, these individuals that were there to interfere with the peaceful protest came back and splintered off into various groups and started causing damage to the city. We had 10 incidents last night where property was damaged. I believe we had one incident where someone was assaulted. We made one arrest. We have numerous investigations going on based on what happened last night. I believe the state police made some arrests. I can't speak to that. You'd have to contact them. But last night we did, to sum it up, we did have one arrest, numerous offense reports, but we had no casualties. No officers were injured, no citizens were injured. Now let's fast forward till today. As you all know, we are currently dealing with an incident at Broadway and 3rd. And as the mayor mentioned earlier, you have citizens who are expressing their First Amendment rights to gather. Unfortunately, this is a situation where a main artery of the city has been impeded. They've been there since about 1 o'clock. We've been talking with them. I personally went down and spoke with them. They made it very clear that they were not going to move. And we're continuing to try to talk to them to get them to move and realize that we don't want to interfere with their First Amendment rights, but at the same time, you can't interfere with the free passage of others. And so that is ongoing as I sit here today. Also, just to kind of let you know, as we continue to get updated intelligence, we have received a pretty credible intelligence that members and leaders in our city and state in Central Arkansas have been targeted for possible attacks against their lives. And so I want to say that again. This is very serious. Local, state, and government officials in Central Arkansas, there have been credible threats against their lives. And so we're taking this serious. We understand that there are people that may have different beliefs than we have, but at the same time, we're going to make sure our citizens are safe. We're going to make sure our officers are safe. We're going to make sure our city's safe. And so I just wanted to share that, and I support the mayor in going to an 8 o'clock curfew. We believe that there are going to be those individuals who are going to get the message that they need to be at home, that if they're going to do anything as far as congregating or protesting, they need to do it early so that we can keep the streets safe. And that's all I have at this time, Mayor.
And before we open the floor for questions, I do want to acknowledge and share the appreciation to the freedom of press and members of the press community who are covering press in a fair and impartial way. And in times like these, they too are in danger. And we recognize there was a member of the press from the Arkansas Democrat Gazette that did receive an injury, and we are praying for their quick recovery. We also know I believe Shelby Rose also had an encounter, I believe it's Saturday night or Sunday night, but with KTV, we want to stress the prayers for her, but every member of the press community, because that's what we're about here in the United States of America, is to have the free ability to report the press. And even in those times that we're in, it can be a bit dangerous, and want you to know that we appreciate you. And so with that being said, we'll open the floor for questions. Well, we'll share that with Chief Humphrey.
So the plan is the warnings. We try to educate. We've talked about the 3 E's: education, engagement, education, and enforcement. We're still going to do that. We're going to give individuals an opportunity to obey the law, explain as to why, and any type of enforcement is a last-ditch effort. We truly believe that we have citizens in our city that will, based on the nature of what's going on throughout the nation and what we've experienced here, we truly believe that we have citizens that will abide by those rules. If not, then we will take enforcement actions.
Can you tell me a little bit about the enforcement actions? Are you talking about arrests? Are you going to push them back onto the sidewalks?
I think all of that is possible, yeah. Well, that's a whole different area. That's a higher level that we hope to go to. We want to go no higher than officer presence. Just our presence, that's what we want to utilize at this time. So we're not going to say that's going to happen. That's going to be a last ditch effort if it has to occur.
Yes, and so I'll give a brief chronological, and again, one of the things that I espouse to is to always be accountable, clear, and transparent. And so I'll give a brief encounter as to why I was at the protest. Number one, you should know that mayor's position is a 24/7 job. While it was the first time that I was physically on the front line at the protest, ever since the first protest, I was within a block away of protesters Saturday and Sunday night, monitoring the situation, and also in close contact with Chief Humphrey throughout that process to just understand what was going on the front line. And then Monday, members of the community, particularly the young organizers, young women organizers who reached out to our office and wanted to visit, to be heard. And I want to be specific on that word, heard. What we're seeing right now is pain and suffering that has been agonizing and pent up. And there are many members of our residents of our city and across this nation that have been unheard and want to be heard. And so they reached out, and we had a 2-hour lunch meeting, and we just listened. Many members of my team members listened for 2 hours of their concerns. And I want to tell you, being in this era right now, unprecedented time, this is our generation's moment where we're experiencing the things that we may have read history about. And sitting in front of those young women to hear their concerns and the ability that they have organized peaceful protests. They wanted to share that there was a distinction between them, and they knew too that they had begun to find intel themselves that there were people who were hell-bent on destroying the city of Little Rock, and they wanted to distinguish themselves. And I'm sorry for saying hell-bent, but I'm being transparent right now, so excuse me, I'm still a preacher, I apologize. But from that standpoint, they wanted to share that they are peaceful, and there are other folks there that are not. And through that listening session I asked, what can we do? We're going to listen to the concerns. We're going to work on a lot of these public policies, some of which we've already been working on, but others that we need to continue to work on because there's always more work to do. And so they requested my presence. They felt that my presence would help diffuse things in addition to the curfew. They felt my presence could help start a healing process for those members of the community that's been impacted by this crises that we're seeing across the nation. And I shared that I would go, and Chief Humphrey would go, to provide this presence of protection, because they knew too there were other folks that could create chaos. But we shared that it was not our goal to speak. We wanted to listen, just like we listened for 2 hours to them. And so that was the reason why I was there, being requested by the community to have a presence there to listen to those who are being unheard, and to let them know that their city is listening to them, and their city is going to do everything within their fiber, not only to help maintain peace and protect, but to listen to them and find them quality ways to be responsive in a productive manner with the things that they shared. And I stayed there the entire time. I will say in leadership, sometimes leaders make mistakes. As we began to receive intel, and I'm going to be very transparent, I ran for mayor of Little Rock. Yes, I'm the first black elected mayor. I'm not the black mayor of Little Rock, I'm the mayor of Little Rock. And the internal why for why we ran was to unite this city. And anyone who's been in this city the past 17 months understands that we have been building stronger bridges than before. We've been uniting the city, helping us move from being disconnected to connected. And a part of that process is that I'm still a black man. And I do understand the pain and the suffering and the voices of those that believe to be unheard. And I honestly got caught up in the moment, because I too am hurting. I'm agonizing. And in leadership, while we may wear our hearts on our sleeves, your mayor is human too. And I got caught up with my own heart in the moment and did not listen to law enforcement recommendations that it was time to leave. And by the last call, and I think it was Lieutenant Dyer who said, you about to leave, I'm gonna move you myself kind of situation. I went up to those young women that I had previously had lunch with and said, hey, we're getting intel, it's getting worse as we have already shared the reason why we had the 10 o'clock curfew. We thank you for telling those protesters, because if I want everyone, let's report this correctly. That curfew was peaceful, and those leaders were saying, we got a 10 o'clock curfew, we're going to shut this down at 10 o'clock. And as we understood the things where people were coming, I want to paint this picture. There are people walking up, padded up, backpacks, ready to be destructive. And as we received that intel, I shared with those 3 or 4 young women. I hugged them, which I probably shouldn't have done, trying to be socially distant, is then to share it's time to leave. And then we started to walk and help usher them, and before I knew it, it turned into a march, and it was not intentional at all.
Mayor, I'm sorry, Melissa, can you please make sure you repeat the question as best as you can before you answer, just for the people watching?
Yes. The question is, do I still plan to be out there tonight in the coming days? We just issued a very amendment to our previously issued curfew, and again, the information that I received is extremely critical and severe, and that is the reason why we're setting the 8 o'clock curfew in the best interest of the public health, safety, and welfare of our city, to protect peaceful protesters, to maintain peace, and to protect our city. So I will not be out there tonight.
Mayor, I understand that, you don't want to give too many details of this intel, don't want to hinder a potential investigation, but can we get a little bit more details on these out-of-state antagonists? I mean, all 4 people last night that were arrested in Little Rock, North Rock, and all our hands. So can you give us a little bit more specifics of where these outside forces?
Well, the chief can talk about it, but I will let him get that specific. But I will share that the question is, what about these outside forces when there was Arkansans that were arrested last night? They're professional outside sources. They know exactly what to do to instigate violence and project a reaction from the Little Rock Police Department and all law enforcement and not get caught. And so when you have that type of issue, it's alarming. And quite frankly, it is abusing peaceful protesters and putting them in harm's way. Chief Humphrey?
Yeah, the question regarding the outside influences, you're correct. The individuals that were arrested last night were local. However, the ones that weren't arrested and that were not detained are the ones that come from the outside. And when we talk about outside, we talk about from all over the nation. There are organizations, organized organizations out here, sanctioned organizations that actually, this is what they do. They have people on their payrolls and they send them out to different locations. If you really pay attention to the news, there are times when you will see the same person that may have been here in Little Rock today, and they might be in Minneapolis tomorrow. So those are the ones that we're talking about. We're talking about people who are coming on buses. We're talking about people who are driving, people that are coming all forms of transportational modes to get here. And so just because they weren't arrested last night, it doesn't mean that the intelligence isn't valid. I truly I believe that following the intelligence that we have received over the last week, I think that's what has allowed us to respond effectively and not have that incident that could really cause us to have a lot of injuries or worse. So they're out there, and people might say, well, who do they look like? Well, they look like everyone. They look like everyone, and so we have to take that information. That's the good thing about having a fusion center. That's a good thing about being able to work with our federal agencies and us having an intelligence unit, because we're continually getting updates on that stuff that we can pump out and assist the officers, help keeping the citizens safe.
Can you talk about the arrests? I haven't seen any charges that say property damage or hits for you guys. Was there enough police presence, or should there have been more arrests? Were people
Yeah, so that's a good question. Who were the people actually arrested for? If I'm making no mistake, the person that we took into custody last night was a vandalism charge. We had just one person arrested, multiple vandalism charges, and so the good thing that we're able to hopefully review our video footage or someone would come forward and provide information about others. And so it comes down to the safest way to address these issues for the officers and the public. And this was an incident where we were able to arrest this individual without incident. That's what we look for. You know, if it comes down to a person's safety versus property, of course the safety is going to be first, but at some point we have to take a stand. And I've made this very clear, and me and the mayor spoke when it was apparent that we were going to have protests in the city, that we're going to allow people to protest. We're going to allow people to express their First Amendment rights. We believe that. Last night, I made sure every time I've spoken to a group, I have assured them that that's what's going to happen. But I've also told the mayor that when it gets to the point of people destroying property, and to the point that it could scar this city, property, life being taken. Unfortunately, we had a couple of reporters that have been injured. That's crossing the line, and we have to decide that's not going to happen here in this city. So it doesn't mean other arrests aren't warranted or aren't coming. That was just one person that we were able to arrest. Because what also happened, the police presence was amazing. It's just that the groups splinter off. And so there's always a leader. And so they follow several leaders, so they'll follow one here, follow one here. So you might have one group contained, and they split off into 10 or 15 different groups. And now you've got to follow all those. And all of them aren't going to do something. It's a distraction, but you have to put eyes on all of them, and then, you know, do the efforts to reduce the chances of them committing a crime.
Next question.
Chief, what do you think about, what are your thoughts on the FOP's 170 members from last week's meeting?
Not going to talk about the FOP, not going to talk about here to talk about the safety of the city.
Next question.
Mayor, going off of, you mentioned the march yesterday, was there a plan when that happened? Did you kind of know that people were going to be moving down Capitol Avenue, or is there any discussion there? I mean, people were going to close the curfew, people are now moving towards downtown, where there are more businesses, residential areas, apartments.
If you're asking, was the march planned? No. As I shared earlier, I was requested, and the chief as well, to have our presence, to have a spirit of protection for those peaceful protesters, because they were alarmed to those outside forces. And so we were there to listen, we were there to learn, we were there to make sure that those voices that feel that their voices aren't being heard, that they were heard. And as I shared earlier, just out of full transparency, the moment caught my heartstrings, my mind, being a black man in Little Rock and a black man in America. And at the end of the day, that was my mistake, because I should allow my mind to control my heart. That was a mistake, and that's something I apologize for. And the main reason why is because there are men and women that literally, because of previous threats, wake up every day to protect and serve me. And my heart took over my mind at that point in time. And it's a blessing that we're still here. It's a blessing that I want to make sure we understand. We haven't had any casualties in Little Rock. We haven't had any major injuries. That's a blessing. And in leadership, you share when you make a mistake. It took over my mind, and it is what it is, and I apologize for that. And in situations like that, being the leader of the city, I have to stand up and hold myself accountable. Even though we were requested, I probably should have left a little earlier. It's not a probably, I should have left a little earlier. It didn't transpire, and again, whether the reason why I stayed to help those young women to get the safety, it transpired in what it did, and that's yesterday. We learn from our mistakes. We present ourselves to be accountable, to atone, to acknowledge where we made some mistakes, and we move forward for this present. And based on that, we're going to continue to protect peaceful protesters, and we're going to continue to protect the health, safety, and welfare and property of the city of Little Rock. My hometown. I'm born, raised here, still live here. Born and raised and still live in my area. The city of Little Rock will not be destroyed on my watch.
This is the last question. When we see buildings start to be damaged, are
Will we see, the question is, will we see police going into areas quicker when there is potential, or we start to see damage? Each situation is different. It depends on the size of the crowd. It depends on the extent of the damage. It just depends if innocent people are there and they might get injured. So every situation is different. It's a fluid situation as it comes up. Because it wouldn't be right for me to say, if we see one person breaking a window, we're going to send in our special response team. You know, so it has to be based on what we're observing, and the technology that we use to monitor those areas gives us a pretty clear picture of what resources and what level of response we need to provide.
I just have one last question, Mayor. I just wanted to ask, just to clarify that you admitted a mistake. What specific mistake? Was it the mistake of staying after curfew? Was it the mistake of continuing down Capitol Avenue away from the state capitol? What was the specific mistake that kind of your part took?
Well, I think I've been very transparent to how my heart took over, and so I don't think there's a need to respond. But what I will share and what I will respond with is, to the peaceful protesters, you will be protected. To perpetrators, you will be dealt with. And we will maintain the health, safety, and peace and welfare of the city of Little Rock, and we will continue to allow our internal wide mission is to unite this city, and you are going to continue to see that. Thank you so much, everyone. Have a blessed day.